Anyway, oh gosh, my little Android here had too much shit on it, so I had to delete a couple things. But this is part two, a continuation, if you will, right here on the Clark the Shark Show, as I so fabulously began and framed my review of this important 1968 album, Rolling Stones' Beggars, Banquet. Now, this is not a transitional album. Sorta, you could make a case that it is, because Let It Bleed in 1969, the Stones sound real grown up there. I mean, all those songs are like, wow, where did this come from? But this album is the one in between that and Satanic Majesties. And this album really is grown up and comes out of nowhere. Really updated makeover. A bunch of new, fresh ideas here from the Rolling Stones. Now, Brian Jones is still in the band, and he is on this album here, people, indeed, and he is contributing. Now, perhaps you guys have seen the video, where the Stones are recording Sympathy for the Devil. And there's all these, talk and sayings and rumors that, Brian Jones, you could never get a hold of him. He was never around when the Stones recorded this album, Beggars Banquet. But it's not true. Brian Jones was indeed very much a contributor to this album in 1968. And of course, he was a huge contributor to their Satanic Majesties Request, 1967. So all this talk about how Brian Jones was, just this drug addict hanging out at his mansion, and of course he got supposedly got murdered by the crew, the construction guys all working at his house, and that may or may not be true. You will never really know. I think it might be. But I don't like to hear people say that Brian Jones, was just all drugged out and he was never around the Stones on this album, because indeed he was on this album. Maybe not in a full Brian Jones capacity, but he was. And there's a video of them filming the creation of Sympathy. And Brian Jones is indeed there, you guys. And he is on this album. There's no doubt about it. This very new and mature album for the Rolling Stones. And this album is so incredible because it's one of those albums that changed music forever. I mean, this album really changed rock and roll, because all the other bands, they looked at the Rolling Stones on this album, even the Beatles, and everyone was like, man, the Stones are all grown up, mature. They're writing these huge, important songs now. And we want to be like the Rolling Stones. That's what every band was saying. And 1968, 69 was, those were years where bands either, got with it and moved forward, like The Who and other bands, or many bands just broke up or disappeared in this phase. And, the Electric Prunes and, the Remains, the Count Five. I could think of a lot of bands from 1966 that just couldn't quite make it through 1968, 1969. They never made it to 1970. There's a lot of bands, and who knows, maybe their record contract screwed them up or whatever. But I think the changing times, psychedelia hit in 1967. And it was confusing because I think a lot of bands thought psychedelia would last a lot longer, but it really didn't. 1967, some people thought that would last forever. And it did last a bit into 1968, but there were just too many bands going back to the blues and, stripping down their sound and making a rock and roll bluesy sound in 1968. There were ambitious bands, like The Who and others, the Moody Blues, and that were trying to keep on going with that progressive, thing, or kind of a little bit like psychedelic thing. And then, there were bands like Yes, ELP, that were, Jethro Tull and others that were emerging, 1969 and all that. that had this whole new sound. It wasn't really psychedelic, it was progressive. And, but the Rolling Stones, they had this down home, bluesy, acoustic, really kick ass bluesman, thing here that was authentic and legit with this album. And this album has nothing to do with all the Rolling Stones before it, and yet it very much does, you guys. And I really like the change here. And of course, I really love Let It Bleed. And everything after that is where the Stones just become, they always were an incredible, great band, but they went to the next level, you guys. Or maybe they just got older, more mature, like what happens to all of us naturally, And of course, the real cover is this, you guys. That was supposed to be the cover of this album in 1968, and the record label rejected it. It was important, to have this cover because the Stones were a bluesy, down home, scuzzy, dirty, messy, ugly blues band, and this cover goes with that. And of course, eventually, this would become the cover over time to the Rolling Stones' Beggars Banquet, produced by Jimmy Miller. Just an incredible album, you guys, and it's got to get 5 stars, of course. It gets that from me, Clark the Shark, certainly. And, these songs, man, Sympathy for the Devil, I don't have to tell you guys, one of the greatest rock and roll songs in history. This song just comes out of nowhere, and it sounds like nothing like the Rolling Stones before this, Just this huge song in the history of rock. Gigantic. Words, cannot describe that amazing song, with just the bongo congas and it's just so killer, man. What lyrics, what a song. Classic anthem. And No Expectations, really killer, man. Bluesy, soulful, slow, Brian Jones plays like a little mellotron on it that really goes with it, One of the best Stones songs. Dear Doctor, Parachute Woman, couple of bluesy Stones classics, good music, solid meat and potatoes, goes with the concept of the blues. Jigsaw Puzzle, I love that song, you guys. Maybe my favorite song on side 1. I love it. I love, the intro. I even love kind of the messy way, Charlie Watts is playing on this, and the Stones just seem like this bluesy rock band, very focused on this new sound that they are doing, you guys. And yet, I always get a feeling the Stones seem a little lost on this album. I get this slight little tinge, that the album could have been better, and yet I don't. I'm like, this is fucking killer, man. This album is perfect, And where the Kinks' Muswell Hillbillies gets really sort of deliberate blues and down home country blues, this album, it's not, it is deliberate and it is calculated and focused, and yet there's something very natural about this album, you guys. Natural about this return to the blues that Mick and Keith and everybody in the band is doing. Now, Street Fightin', man, one of the greatest Rolling Stones songs, all 316 of it, just a classic. I want you guys out there to buy this album. And if you're a young person born in the year 2001 and you're 22 right now, in the year 2023, I speak to you from May 10, 2023 here in Los Angeles. I want you young people that are just 22 years old, 21, I want you to buy this album, and I want you to hear Street Fightin', man, of course, but I want you to hear the whole album, man. Every song, ahead of its time, yes, but right with the times of 1968, yes. Prodigal Son, awesome. Love it. Love it. Killer, man. Of course, Led Zeppelin has a song called Poor Tom. That could have like been on this album or something. I love the bluesy little foot stomping concepts. And Stray Cat Blues is way ahead of its time, you guys. That song sounds like it could be a Stone song from 1976 or 1973 or something off one of those albums. I'm not kidding, you guys. Stray Cat Blues could be off Goat's Head Soup or Black and Blue. Or it could even be off Like Some Girls. It is way ahead of its time, you guys. You got to hear Stray Cat Blues, especially if you're a young person, just 20 years old right now, and you were born in 2003. Buy this album, you guys, for Stray Cat Blues. Side 2 is amazing. Factory Girl. I love it, I love the bluesy, just dirty bluesy, man, this album. So awesome. But of course, one of the greatest Rolling Stones songs in their recording history is Salt of the Earth, with the backing ladies singing, from the Watts, the black girls singing the backing vocals, and Keith, singing. Once again, it's a Rolling Stones song that's way ahead of its time. It sounds like a song from 1972 off Exile on Main Street, or oh man, Salt of the Earth could be a Stone song from 1974 off It's Only Rock and Roll. I mean, the Stones got visionary here, people, on this album. In 1968, I don't know if it was the drugs or the alcohol or just the bluesy, just wanting to go back to the blues and recapture their early days, their roots. And in doing that, they went to the future, and they went futuristic, way ahead of their time here on this album, you guys. This amazing album right here from 1968, the Rolling Stones, Beggars Banquet. This album is essential, you guys, for your record collection. And Clark the Shark right here from the fabulous golden EIB Sharkerphone. I'm telling you, you guys, you got to own this album. Try to find the vinyl. Try to find the analog vinyl. But find any vinyl of this. But, get the CD. Get the remastered or remixed or whatever enhanced CD of this. Because you got to hear these songs. Because the Rolling Stones become the world's greatest rock and roll band on this album. They were the greatest rock and roll band before this, but on this album, they go to the next level, you guys. And then on Let It Bleed, they go to another level beyond this. But on Sticky Fingers and Exile on Main Street, they go to another level, you guys. And every rock band is in awe of Mick and Keith and everybody in the Stones. And it's so sad that Brian Jones got murdered, or, whatever happened to him, the misfortune, the misadventure, the alcohol, the drugs in his swimming pool. And I always wonder, was he electrocuted by the pool light in his pool? Because Clark the Shark, maybe that guy who did his swimming pool didn't strangle him or hold him underwater, or they had a drunken party in the pool and he died by accident somehow, some way. Maybe it was as simple as Brian was left alone in the pool and he touched the pool light, you guys, and he got electrocuted. And they found his body at the bottom of the pool. They pulled him out, and maybe it wouldn't show that Brian Jones was electrocuted by his pool light or something like that in the pool. But he did contribute, you guys, to this album in 1968. But sadly, Brian Jones would die later, much later after this album, in 1969 in the summer. I think it was August of 1969, maybe July, where Brian Jones died in his swimming pool. And Clark the Shark, a guy who cleaned pools and repaired pools for about 27 years, I wonder to this day, did Brian Jones get shocked by his pool light? I know that contractor emptied the pool at his house and they were down there playing, organ and keyboards and singing songs like that movie depicts. I forget that guy's name, the guy that they think killed Brian Jones. But he started hanging out with Brian Jones a lot at the house. And if he drained that pool, he left the pool light on, it could have melted the rubber gasket around the light. You know how those pool lights get ruined if you run them, without the water in them. And then when they refilled that pool, those lights become faulty. And there is a chance, way back in the 60s, there was probably no breaker, no GFI. I'm sure, those pool lights were hot wired in. They were just lights like in a wall, like we have today, like when you flick your switch. And it's possible Brian Jones swam up to his pool light and he touched it and he died in his pool in 1969, you guys. But we will never know. Right here on the Clark the Shark Show, where I just gave you the only review that you will ever need of this amazing Rolling Stones album, parts 1 and part 2, right here from me, Clark the Shark, at 1-800-449-8255, from the fabulous golden EIB Sharkerphone. It's not just a microphone here, baby, with Sharky. No way. It's a golden EIB Sharkerphone. And I want you guys to buy Beggars Banquet by the Rolling Stones, and I want you to do it for Brian. I don't think he's in heaven, you guys. If there's a Lord, if there's a God, Jesus, or, any kind of God, Mohammed, Buddha, Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, Yahweh, whatever God. I don't think Brian Jones is in heaven, you guys. No way. He wasn't meant to be. But, who knows? Maybe God will be like, well, the guy was insane. But I don't know. That guy liked to party. He liked to get with a lot of women, and he liked to drink. And he lived a bluesy rock and roll lifestyle like we all did when we were young back in the day, including yours truly, me, Clark the Shark. And who knows? Maybe God will be like, you, Sharky, are not immune, and maybe I'm not. Maybe I am. I don't know. I try to pray every night and ask God or who's ever up there to forgive me. But one of the things I love about the Stones is these guys are unapologetic bluesmen. And you'll never make a saint of them, man. No fucking way. Right here with the Rolling Stones, Beggars Banquet. Fuck, dude, what an album, you guys. I love this album. Warts and all, imperfections, I don't even know what the word is. I often think of this album that I just wish it had one more great song on it. There is a great song that's missing from this album, and you guys all know the one. Jumpin' Jack Flash should have been on this album, but it's not, but this album is still great, you guys, because it's got so much great material on it that is important. Right here on the Clark the Shark Show, I'm Clark the Shark, and you just heard the word, the testimony, the gospel. The only review you'll ever need of the Stones' Beggars Banquet, this bluesy, down-home, dirty, rotten, smelly album by these English, amazing rockers. The greatest band in the world, you guys, the Rolling Stones. Are they as good as The Who? No. Are they as good as Led Zeppelin? No, no way. Are they as good as all those bands, ELP, Yes, Rush, Kansas, Supertramp, Styx, Foreigner, Triumph? No, they're not musicians like that, but the Rolling Stones are better than everybody because these down-home bluesmen, these simple guys just chewing on fucking Marlboro Reds and drinking whiskey on stage, these guys know more about life than you and me will ever know. The Rolling Stones are just dirty fucking trash losers, and they tell it like it is better than anyone, you guys. And it's weird because they go out and make millions of dollars on the road, and they're just a big corporate entity, and yet they're still so fucking authentic. And Charlie Watts, man, God bless him. He wasn't that good of a drummer, just like Ringo. But there's something about Charlie Watts that you can't replace. You know, his funny personality, you know, he goes right with the Rolling Stones. And God bless him. Rest in peace. Now, there's a guy who's in heaven, you guys, for sure. Charlie Watts. Yeah, he's a saint, man. You will make a saint of him. Right here on the Clark the Shark Show, you guys. Hope you love this album. I want you to buy it at iTunes, Spotify, Amazon. The Rolling Stones, Beggars, Banquet, one of the most important albums in rock and roll history. Right here on the Clark the Shark Show. And I'm out of here, people. Love all of you. Peace.